So all year, we're following the way of Jesus. Or wait, no, we're learning that way. For those of us who are Christians, we are disciples of Jesus. That means a follower or a learner of Jesus. The truth is that it takes your whole life to grow in your ability to learn to follow his way. So that's what we're doing. We're in some ways following, but mostly we're learning the way of Jesus this year, which basically means that all year we're asking the big question, if the gospel is true, how then should we live? Well, to start with, we've been working through a very famous teaching of Jesus called the Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew in the Bible. And we're calling this series from the Sermon on the Mount, The Unexpected Way. The reason is this, that the teaching of Jesus leads to a whole new gospel-centered ethic. It's totally unique. And the way of Jesus is different. It's different from every other philosophy or religion in the history of the world. If it's actually put into practice, it can bring about an abundant life, not an easy life, but a life filled with love and with joy and peace. This is the way. Well, for the past few weeks, Jesus has been teaching us that the heart of God goes way beyond what the law prohibits. The commandments, you shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, things like that. And the reason is that it is rooted, the law is rooted, those prohibitions, the do you shall nots, are rooted in something deeper. They're rooted in the goodness and the wisdom and the love of God, of who God is. In our ability to value other people, or our ability to be faithful and loving unconditionally in marriage. And other examples that we will consider again and again. Jesus refuses to shrink the requirements of the moral law down to something that we could all do easily. Instead, he raises the bar far higher than probably any of us would expect or like. Well, today we have one more example of this high standard relating to our commitment to speak the truth and to be men and women of our word. Is this not such a needed teaching for our world today? So before we jump into God's word, let's just think about the world we live in. A world of beauty, a world of pain. A world of goodness and truth, but a world of deception and lies. We live in a culture that doesn't really believe in truth, at least not in the absolute truth or universal sense of that concept. Whether you look in our politics or our education system, our arts, our media in various forms, if you pay attention to the stories that we're told or read in the news, it's clear to me that we're becoming more and more of a secular culture. Now, a secular life doesn't have a view of God. It could be that you don't believe in God, like that's what an atheist would say. But perhaps, like many people, most people even, don't necessarily not believe in God. Perhaps you do believe in God, but it doesn't have any impact on your life. That's a secular life. And if there's no God who is transcendent over all, then there's no objective truth that is over all. So what are we left with? Well, today we're left with basically only facts and opinions. Now we're left with scientific facts that may very well be replaced. Some of us are old enough to know these things. Eggs are good. No, eggs are bad. Eggs are kind of good. You should probably just be careful with eggs. We don't really know. Okay, it's a silly example of a changing fact. Now, the facts are generally replaced by further scientific inquiry, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. Hopefully that inquiry will lead us to truer facts. But what is a fact today may not, in fact, be a fact tomorrow. We've experienced this. Also, there's a well-documented history of confirmation bias in and outside of the sciences. Now, of course, this is a problem for everyone. This is a human problem. We all want what we believe to be true and just look for evidence that it is. But this is also true in science, looking for evidence that only supports our existing beliefs. Stories of confirmation bias undermine our ability to trust the facts. Now, please hear me. I am not anti-science. at all. But many people have the feeling that so-called facts change, that what is presented as true, the truth, will change over time. Beyond facts, in a secular society, everything else is just your opinion. With no God, with no objective truth, there can be no higher law and no objective right or wrong. Who are you to say that what you believe is good and evil might be different than what I believe? Now, of course, no one actually lives like this is fully true. Even the most secular people I know still believe that the cops ought to come to their house if it's being robbed, or that things like rape or human trafficking are objectively wrong, not just like your opinion. Yet without a God who is over all, these beliefs are only coming from our opinions or what we feel to be true. Now, I think this is why we're encouraged more and more in our culture to share our truth. Not the truth, of course, because there is no truth, but your truth or my truth. Well, it's no wonder people are so confused. It's no wonder, to me, that kids don't know what to think about who they are or what the world is about or what is right and wrong. And I think it's no wonder. It makes perfect sense to me why people are so upset in our world today with each other. Why they don't understand how to handle someone that has a different opinion or perspective than them. Why? Because everyone is sharing their truth as if it's God's truth, but it's not. It's just your opinion. So we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle the situation. We don't know how to reconcile with other people when our perspectives, our opinions, our facts, our truth is different. What do you think God has to say about this? Is the way of Jesus the same as the way of our world, or is it different in some way than the ways of our world? You bet it's different. Let's jump into the teaching of Jesus. If you have a Bible or a Bible app, please take it and open it to Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 33. Matthew chapter 5, verse 33. We'll put it up on the screens for you too. But we're going to read through this section and then we'll unpack it together. So let's read through this, starting with Matthew 5, verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one." This is God's word. Well, again, just like the last 2 weeks, Jesus gives us here one more example that the Old Testament law, the Old Testament in our Bibles, the Hebrew Bible in his day, that law has an underlying principle or underlying principles that go way beyond what the law simply prohibits. But this underlying principle, which is rooted in God's character, is how God intends and has always intended for human beings to actually live. Now, in this case, in our passage today, it is that God greatly cares about how we speak to others and how we speak about others, and that it is rooted in the truth. So let's start again with verse 33, excuse me. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, "Do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all." Well, let's pause here. So this should start to sound familiar to us. For the last 2 weeks, we had different examples that Jesus gave us in exactly the same kind of formula. You've heard that it was said, again, this is from the Old Testament law, but I tell you. So Jesus starts this section with, again, here's another example of what I've been saying. Again, you have heard that it was said to the people long ago, what? Do not break your oath. So where in the Old Testament law does this come from? Well, in this teaching, Jesus is a little less clear than in the last few examples, which law specifically he's referring to. But I believe he actually had several in mind. Probably he's referring to the third commandment of the 10 Commandments, which is do not misuse the Lord's name. Some of you might have learned that verse as not to take the Lord's name in vain, and specifically when making an oath. In a day before there were legal contracts, computer contracts emailed to each other, where you could be sued in court for breaking your contract, and this was a regular occurrence as it is today, making an oath or a vow was how you communicated to someone if you were serious or not. Think about it. Back then, 2,000 years ago, could you run a background check on someone? Could you, strap them up to a polygraph machine? No. So how would you know that they were a man or woman of their word? By oath, by a solemn vow. Now, there are several places in the Old Testament dealing with the taking of oaths or the making of solemn vows. My favorite passage is Ecclesiastes chapter 5, verse 4. We'll put it up here. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to fulfill it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. I love that. Okay. God does not take pleasure in fools. Do what you said. Okay. The Bible's awesome. So do not misuse the Lord's name and keep your vows. Okay, there's a whole constellation of passages in the Old Testament that talk about that. But also, we have the 9th commandment of the 10 Commandments, which says, you shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. Now, this law is rooted in our responsibility to speak what is true about other people. So what is Jesus referring to in this teaching? Well, probably all of these passages and more, many more passages, form the cultural background to his teaching. And if that's true, then likely the expectation of people in his day, and probably I would say the expectation of people in our day, is that if you make an oath, if you sign a legal contract, if you make a promise to God, then you should do it. You need to do what you say you'll do. But Jesus goes beyond this, as he has in the last few weeks of our teaching. Again, he raises the bar for us who are trying to learn his way and trying to follow his way. He says, but I tell you, here's the interpretation of Jesus. Do not swear an oath at all. Why? Isn't that like a good thing? Doesn't that reinforce our trustworthiness between people? Does Jesus hate oaths? Does he not want us to sign contracts? Does he think that it's not right for us to make a promise before God or to God? No, I don't think any of that is the point here. And the reason I say this is if you hop down to verse 37, later he says, all you need to say is simply yes or no. In other words, Jesus is calling us, people who are trying to follow him, people who are trying to learn his way, he is calling his followers to be so committed to the truth, to be men and women of such integrity who are so reliable in doing what we say that we're going to do that no special oath, no binding agreement is even needed. When people find out that you're a Christian, do they almost reflexively trust you to be a man or woman of your word? If not, we haven't been doing a very good job with this principle. Christians should be so known for being people who speak the truth, even when it costs them personally. Christians should be known for doing what they say they'll do. Christians should be known for being careful in our speech, both to other people and about other people who are not in the room. When we speak, our speech must be in alignment with the values of God's kingdom. Now, this is true, notice, with no qualifications. Jesus teaches this with no exceptions. It doesn't matter if the person you're speaking to or speaking about is a Christian or not. It doesn't matter if they're a believer in God or an unbeliever. It doesn't matter who they voted for, where they live, how old they are, what they do in their profession. He gives us no place to hide again. Now, this is so hard, right? We're constantly tempted to shrink the righteous requirements of the law, you and me both, to fudge the truth or to not tell the whole truth. Because why? Because we don't want to look stupid, or we don't want to look selfish, or we just don't want it many times to appear uncool. Once we realize how hard it is to do something that we said we would do, we're often tempted. How often are we tempted to play games to try and get out of our commitments? Or to lie, come up with excuses about why we can't do what we said we would do. Now, I don't think this is only a problem for us today. I think this is, again, a human problem, a universal problem because of the brokenness of sin in this world. And the reason I think that is because of what Jesus says next. It was no different, I believe, in his day as it is in our day today. Look back at verse 34. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Now, let's pause here. What's going on here? Sometimes the Bible is hard to understand because the examples are not examples that we use in our culture today. I don't know of anybody that swears by heaven or by the earth or by Jerusalem. Do you? Probably not. I've heard of people say, I swear to God. Maybe that's similar. But this is a little different culturally. Well, what's going on here is Jesus gives really two examples of the type of games that I mentioned that people are tempted, that we are tempted to play to get out of keeping our word. The first example is swearing by heaven or by the earth or by the city of Jerusalem. Now, to give just a little context, in Jesus' day, the Pharisees, or the religious leaders of the time, were teaching people that certain oaths were binding, in other words, that you actually had to do what you swore to do, but other oaths, depending on the language you use, depending on your wording, were not necessarily binding. Problematic, you might imagine. In Matthew 23, Jesus passionately, directly calls out this practice. He says, "Woe to you, blind guides. You say, if anyone swears by the temple, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gold of the temple is bound by the oath. You blind fools." This is Jesus, okay? Which is greater, the gold or the temple that makes the gold sacred? Doesn't make sense what you're teaching. You also say, if anyone swears by the altar, it means nothing, but anyone who swears by the gift on the altar is bound by that oath. You blind men, which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? And he continues on at length. Jesus was upset. God doesn't want us to play games with the words that we use in this way. A solemn oath that you can break on a technicality inspires no trust between people, only suspicion and self-protection, and results in a society where everyone has to watch out for themselves. Kind of sounds like today, right? But this is not the world that God wants. And this is not the kind of relationships that God wants us to have with other people. And this is not the type of people that God wants us to be. So in our passage today, Jesus says, don't swear an oath. By heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, or by Jerusalem. Don't play these games. Why? It's not yours to give. These things, heaven, earth, city of Jerusalem even, they're not yours to give in collateral for this promise you're making. It's mine, says the Lord. These things are mine. If I'm entering into some sort of contract, I can't list your car or your house in collateral if I don't come through on my contract, right? Someone say amen. That would not be good. Oh, shoot, I lost my car. Why? My brother had a debt, and so they collected it from me. That's not a good world to live in. Jesus is saying, you swear by heaven or by earth or by Jerusalem, these are not yours to possess. They are not yours to give in collateral for a promise. I think God might say something like this in light of this teaching. If you're not sure if you're going to keep your word, if you're not committed to the truth, don't drag me into this. Don't say, I swear to God, and think it adds to your credibility. It does not. He is not yours to give. Now, the second game that people play is in verse 36. Look at that. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. Now, I think stress sometimes leads to some lightening of my hair. I know some of you are very gifted in hair coloring. I don't think that's what he's talking about here, right? He's not saying we can't go to the salon and come back with purple hair if we want. What he means here is if I break a promise, then essentially I swear by my head, it's swearing by your life. Say, if I don't come through on this promise, may my life be forfeit. But in this memorable way, Jesus reminds us of the limitations of our own sovereign will. What do you and I have the authority to control in our lives? A couple things. Very little, if you think about it. We do not have the sovereign will to will our hair into a different color, even one hair. That's beyond our limitations as human beings. He's talking about our ability to control what happens in our own life. And this is a reality that maybe some of you have not yet fully accepted, which is why you're so stressed out all the time. You're trying to will and control much more than just the color of one hair. None of us can perfectly guarantee what might happen in our future. Not one of us can perfectly guarantee the outcome of this next week. We are not sovereign over the heavens and the earth. We are not God. We are not perfectly sovereign even over our own life. This is not in our job description. So why would you use something like that you cannot control as proof that you will do what you say you will do? What kind of foundation of trust is that? We might think that by swearing, I swear on my life, will add credibility to us, but it does not. Not really. Who are we? Not only does it not make sense because we're human beings, but more so, it shouldn't be necessary. Why? Here's the conclusion in verse 37. All you need to simply say is yes or no. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. Now, I love what commentator Leon Morris writes. He says, quote, no oath is necessary for the truthful person. All you need to say is simply yes or no. If your answer is yes, then say, class, yeah, thank you, yes. The kids are getting it. If your answer is no, then say no. We shouldn't need to play these games to get out of our word, to get out of our responsibility to speak the truth. Jesus concludes with a powerful statement. The last few weeks, we've seen this every time. He's examined the law, he's examined the underlying principle, and he's given a big warning. Pay attention and don't miss this. The warning here is anything beyond this pattern of speech, this commitment to the truth, our ability to be honest with one another, is from the evil one, Satan, our adversary, the devil himself. Anything beyond being a man or woman of your word, anything beyond the simple truth, any games, any bending or hiding of the truth comes from the evil one. In John's gospel, Jesus says that he, the devil, was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. It is a powerful thing to remember that in most of the conversations in the Bible that we read between the devil and various people in various times of temptation, the devil almost always quotes from Scripture. He is a Bible expert. But he either misinterprets it, or he distorts it, or he twists it in some way for his own desires, for destruction, or for his gain. We are playing the devil's game when we play loose with the truth. It is literally satanic in this sense to break our word. Do we understand this? Do we believe that this is true? Do we take the integrity of our word and our speech this seriously, as serious as Jesus takes it? Are we careful, not only in our family or in our friendships or in our workplace or schools, are we careful online, on social media, that what we're sharing, that what we're liking, that what we're repeating are only things that we know to be true? Can other people, including your spouse or your kids or your parents, your coworkers, your friends, can they rely on us that our yes will be yes and our no will be no? Anything beyond this, you're off the way of Jesus. Now, I know this is countercultural. I know that we don't see tons of examples of this out in the world today. It was countercultural in Jesus' day as well. Jesus had to confront and to correct forcefully the silly games that the religious leaders were teaching the religious people to play regarding oaths. But Jesus also had to deal with, confront, challenge, respond to the secular tendency to relativize the truth to just facts and opinions that are shaky and change as well. We see this in his conversation with Pontius Pilate in John chapter 18. Now remember, Jesus' actual life is on the line here. He had been falsely arrested, accused, mocked, and beaten by the religious leaders of his day. But because the Jews were under the Roman government, they needed the political leadership of Rome to put Jesus to death. In other words, the church had to get in bed with the state in order to accomplish their will. So they turned Jesus over to Pontius Pilate, the secular Roman governor in Jerusalem. And John the apostle writes, Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Is that your own idea? Jesus asked him. Or did others talk to you about me? I'm not sure I would be so calm while my life hangs in the balance. Pilate replied, "Am I a Jew? Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it that you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king, then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me," says Jesus to Pilate. "What is the truth?" retorted Pilate. Jesus would go on to be crucified, died, buried, and on the third day rise again from the dead. But that question, what is the truth? That's the statement of a man who was used to doing what was politically expedient, not what was right or honest or true. He was used to getting results, not according to the values of the kingdom of God. Does that not sound like the politics of our day? The church jumping in bed with the state in order to accomplish what is expedient, opposed to the values of the kingdom of God? It doesn't matter what you say to get elected, or what lies you might tell, or what promises you'll break. We know you do that. Everyone does that. so long as you advance our agenda. That temptation was no different in Jesus' day. Pilate tried to get out of crucifying Jesus, but he gave in to the will of the crowds. But the way of Jesus is a different way. It's a way that values the truth even when it's not clearly expedient. It's a way that values honesty even when it costs us. It's a way that calls us to be men and women of our word, to be trustworthy and true, to say what we will do and do it, even though no one else lives like that. Even if we hear no stories of that from the rich and the famous and the powerful. Why? Because we follow one who is a greater king. Whose city is Jerusalem? Jesus says it's the great king's. Who's that? It's Jesus. After his resurrection from the dead, his followers realized who he was talking about. Oh, the one who conquered death. He must be the great king. Why should we care about this? Because we follow him in his way, above all other ways. The one who didn't just care about the truth, but who said, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father, the one who is the ultimate creator of reality, except through me. But imagine, friends, if we actually lived like this. Imagine if we actually were a different kind of people and then a different kind of church formed by those different people, which resulted in a different type of society. How radically different would that world be? Not building our lives on the moving ground of facts and opinions, but on the firm foundation of what is true according to the Word of God, which is the same yesterday, today, and forever. We would be able to, what? Fully trust one another. Why? Because we would know that we're not being deceived or we're playing games with each other. We would be able to fully open ourselves up and be honest and vulnerable to other people. Why? Because we wouldn't have to worry about being used or manipulated in some way. That's the kind of place I want to be. That's the kind of person that I want to be. And that's the kind of people that I want to be a part of, don't you? May this be who we are. May we as a church follow this way so that we can be a light of truth and integrity, becoming trustworthy confidants to all in a world of confusion and deception and manipulation. May we actually do this for the glory of God and the good of all people. Let us pray. Our Father in heaven, you challenge us yet again in so many ways. Father, would you forgive us for the times in our life, maybe recently, when we have avoided being people of integrity, where we've gotten out of agreements or we've gotten out of contracts or we've made oaths and we haven't followed through on them. We've made big promises and we haven't kept our word. Father, would you forgive us for those things? Would you cleanse us from the guilt and the shame of being careless with our speech or deceptive for people, with other people? Father, would you forgive us when we choose our own comfort or our own image over the truth? And Father, finally, would you help us to obey this? Would you help us to follow the way of Jesus and the pattern of our speech in our commitment to being people of truth who speak what is true to other people, who speak what is true about other people, but do so in a way that reflects the love of your kingdom and reflects the love of who you are, so that we might speak the truth in love to the people around us, anyone in our path. Lord, would you give us the strength by your Spirit? Would you give us the faith to do this, even if it costs us? Would you help us to become people who are trustworthy and true, just like your Son? It's in his name that we pray. Amen.